Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shubh, and together with my partner and co host Patric, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey Patrick, we're back again, man. How are you doing?
I'm a little bit brain mushed at the moment,
Hmm.
if that is a term.
I know what that feels like. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm grateful that you sponsor a topic where no thinking is required at
Yes,
all whatsoever.
exactly. The extent of thinking required is nothing at all, as I have said at the start of this show and every other episode. So, just a few days ago, you and I, where we were with our good friends Owen and Martin over at Bricks, Bucks, and Bites, the Bricks, Bucks, and Bites podcast. And I think towards the end of the episode, for those of you interested, one of the, I guess, outtakes or outros that we did was going through. I believe someone had a post on Twitter or Instagram, wherever it was, that there was a lot of discussion on how VCs aren't delivering exits, but there was a satirical take that at least VCs are upping their podcast game,
Yeah.
right? Of course, recently you and I we completed our 50th episode, Patrick, together.
Yes.
So a golden jubilee done and dusted right there.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to us, right? Feels like wow, feels like a lot of time I've spent with you, right? Yeah, a lot of time.
Hmm.
So I thought maybe some introspection, also a whole bunch of nothingness, just to discuss what is it that we do, why do we even do a podcast together, what do we get out of it, do we get anything out of it, does our community get anything out of it, right? Does it all amount to nothing, right? Does it amount to anything? So I don't know where I'm going with all of this, but I thought
Yeah.
maybe we can have like just go wherever the breeze takes us on this topic.
So I remember when we discussed doing a podcast with each other in early 2023.
Hmm.
I don't think we had a very strong objective or hypothesis for, hey, this is like the business reason for doing it. I felt comfortable just rolling with it for a very simple reason, and that is I felt it's just taking the conversations that you and I have anyway
Hmm.
in front of a camera, microphone, and putting it out there and seeing what
Yeah.
happens. But it wouldn't take any time away. It wouldn't take any whatever, making stuff up, playing theater, none of that. So I felt very comfortable with the idea, rolling with it, even without knowing the eventual outcome, taking it as an experiment because the added cost was zero for
Hmm.
me. So that's how it started for me. I don't know what it was
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, very, very similar. I mean, I treated it as, hey, it sort of tickled my intellectual curiosity to the extent where, I could have a chat, which I was anyway having with you. And for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, you know that the first few episodes were streamed live, which was quite the experience. And I think it was interesting to have these sorts of conversations live out there and just see what that feels like. I think, like so many other professions, trades, uh, things that one could do, and we have discussed this before in our discussions as well as in the super series we did with the Bricks and Bytes guys. I feel like this is yet another manifestation of you and me maybe honing our craft together to
Hmm.
see where we can get just by throwing our views out there in the public space and seeing what happens. And I feel like over time, we've also benefited from a whole lot of feedback. So thanks to all of you who have reached out to Patrick or me or Adam or any one of our other colleagues with specific pointed views on a lot of episodes we've done. And I think in many ways, I feel like I really didn't know what I wanted to get out of it, but it seems like a lot of things are happening. Many other things are happening which I didn't expect, and I'm grateful for all of that. And the idea is more or less just to, I guess, put these thoughts out there, and yeah, just to keep compounding on it.
I I have I keep telling several of our colleagues all the time that VC is a business of just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to do perfect decision making under imperfect information. That's
Mm-hmm.
VC. It's nothing else in the
Yeah.
end that drives your value.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one thing, is trying to do perfect decision making under imperfect information. And that means that you need to let information flow. In a VC firm and around an individual investor like you, like me, you want to let information flow so that actually you have the highest chance of having the highest set of potentially available information, which you will never have at 100%. We're in an information asymmetric type of business. There's a lot of hidden and opaque information in startups and in venture, and for founders as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's why you want to maximize the flow of information around yourself. And in order to have the flow of information, I need to have debate.
Mm-hmm.
I I just need to have the debate with you, with founders, with colleagues, etc. If I have it behind closed doors, why not have it in the open?
Yeah.
Like I actually like the concept. I'm not ready to do it just yet, Shub, but I actually like the concept of public investment committees of
Mm.
venture capital firms. I actually think the venture capital firm that does that is going to be hyper differentiated. You will also get hate for it. You will also get flack and whatever, but you will be hyper differentiated because now you're making an intransparent process highly transparent. And
Mm.
at the same time, I'm actually inviting my audience to tell me how I'm thinking wrong about it. Like, isn't that amazing in a decision making business? And I'm
Mm.
treating this podcast with you the same way. I mean, I get confirmation, affirmation. I also get sometimes, hey, I'm thinking differently about it.
Yeah.
That's the most interesting, actually.
Hmm. You've brought up what other VCs do, and obviously, I think it is becoming quite a maybe a meme-worthy jibe at the VC profession. That now a lot of VCs do podcasts. Obviously, a lot of them do events, etc. as well. So, let's say zooming out to just the role of podcasting in the VC profession. What's your take on what you've been seeing with most of them, if not nearly all of them?
Boy, you're asking the wrong person. I consume about as many podcasts as I read non-fiction fiction books,
Mhm.
and that number is very far below 10 per year.
Hmm.
Um, so I can't really speak to any VC podcast because from a VC podcast I listen to nothing. I listen to
Mhm.
more like construction tech podcasts.
Mhm.
Um, but when I can rephrase your question a little bit broader to VC content in general, the number one gripe I have, it's all propaganda. Like
Mhm.
I get very few real takes, um, and it's all marketing.
Yeah.
To that point, actually, sorry, before you perhaps chime in with your view, because I'm interested how you perceive it.
Mhm.
Real anecdote from 90 minutes ago. So 2 weeks ago, I commented on Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes with Martin on the newest round from a company called Sintu,
Hmm.
and I gave praise where praise was due. I
Isn't
gave an
that a company who's
analysis.
recently announced a largish round, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, it was a series. I think they called it a Series B. They denominated a Series B of um, 37. I want to say 37
Okay.
million. It was led by
Mhm.
Partech Growth, etc. And so I gave credit where credit was due because the firm is high quality.
Mhm.
I gave a more critical assessment of what led me to not pull the trigger on the company over the years.
Okay.
And I gave an analysis of what I thought most likely the deal was here, because I'm familiar with some of the things how firms like Partech Growth operate, etc.
Mhm.
And um, a friend of mine who listened to the podcast, who is privy to the deal, 90 minutes ago actually sent me a WhatsApp. Let me actually read it to you because this is what happens when you put yourself out there with no bullshit, no marketing, nothing. He said, hold on. Hey, just listen to your podcast on Sintu. Thanks for it. Spot on everything. I think I can count on the fingers on one hand the early stage investors I know who could describe this deal and the reasoning behind it properly as you did. But one correction, we're underwriting, ba, 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 ba. I'm going to skip that part because that is privy to this conversation. And he then, we had more conversation. I'm not going to read it all, but he said, "Hey, here, this is how you thought about it, right? This one aspect, I thought about it differently. I think that's not correct." That's what you get when you put yourself out there with no BS and just see in a respectful way, the world and you're thinking about it. I did the same thing with energy use in AI. I got into an amazing conversation with Francesco from Augmenta, someone that we respect a lot.
Yeah.
And he was kind enough, I take it as kindness, kind enough to actually engage with me and tell me, hey, actually, I think about it differently. Because we're in a decision-making business. So for me,
Yeah.
that's my point. Podcast and content is not propaganda. It is a way to put myself out there and have people tell me where I'm wrong. How's
Yeah.
it for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, I actually also must confess I'm not a regular consumer of VC or startup podcast, because I think if I do that, I'll be kind of sloshing around in the same echo chamber way too much. So I also need to find a way, which is why I usually turn to other stuff like history or mathematics, as I've tended to, mention in some of our episodes. So other things to kind of broaden where my mind can go. So what I do nevertheless is check in on specific episodes every now and then. And unfortunately, at least the sample I have consumed from VC and startup podcasts is there's usually two or three styles or narratives that are presented in these, and it's surprisingly common across geographies, by the way. So I've heard some podcasts from America, from Europe, from India, and elsewhere as well. There's this aspect of, if it's a founder, for example, that's invited, or a quote unquote veteran investor, successful investor, there's like this weird gushing sort of tone which the host would take in praising the person to the moon, as if this person has done nothing wrong, or like everything is presented like as a rags to riches story. And I always feel like, as you rightly said, it feels quite like a propaganda piece. It is missing a lot of the real context. Just as we know in VC, there is never any such thing as like a perfect deal. There's never any such thing as
Never.
a perfectly executed story. And it is very hard to get that sort of picture from podcasts. So it feels very much like the media division of a company or a person, frankly,
Yes.
doing its job. And
I mean,
it is
sorry. Okay, before you actually, there is a VC firm built on the premise of we're a media company.
yes.
We also happen to be a VC firm. I mean, they are not even hiding it.
Mhm. Yeah. So what I've realized, and many a time, these are not necessarily companies I'm extremely familiar with. I would know a few things, or founders. Again, I would know a few things. I know for a fact that some of the things discussed in those podcasts are not entirely true.
Yeah.
At the least, they're exaggerations. At the worst interpretation, it's clearly like a attempt to mislead the viewers. So for that reason, also over the years, I've tended to stay away from very specific podcasts featuring a specific founder or a specific investor, because I think it also tends to like a hero worshipping sort of mindset, where I've had, for example, people tell me that, hey, so and so person showed up on this podcast. One of my strategies is to actually make sure I get into a deal done by so and so investor. I've actually had people tell me that, right? So just to caution people how far how far people can get influenced by what things are said and how they're presented in these kinds of formats, where people completely anchor their strategies in this format. And by the way, just full disclosure, it doesn't always end well in these cases either, as you can imagine. So, which is why I would exercise caution with taking all podcast content, especially it comes from VCs and startups, directly, including ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to take us on a tangent, but I
Mhm.
promise you, Shub, the tangent relates to what we're discussing. Sorry, but now you've triggered something,
Mhm.
which guys, everybody listening, this is literally what Shub and I do. Like this is just a conversation we're having out in the, we just put it in the public. The way you just described it, do you think part of the success of Donald Trump in the political arena is that people were fed up with marketing and bullshit and two-face, and his very, not that it's a different style, but actually that people can believe he is who he is on stage. Do you think that's part of his secret?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, look, unfortunately, VC is so much removed from the real world in so many ways, even though we may say differently. I think it'll take longer for the customers or the stakeholders of VC, which is startups, investors, and LP investors, and so on, to be like, hey, these guys are feeding us this propaganda, but we haven't realized it's propaganda just yet.
Yeah.
And I think it'll take a while until people realize that, uh, or they'll have the maturity and the sample set to figure out what is truth and what is propaganda. I think we'll eventually get there. Hard for me to say how long it'll take, but it feels very much like we are wading through propaganda at this point. If
And
you're
at some
talking,
point, the taste of the audience flips.
yes.
Whoever your audience is, whether it is voters or as a VC, your audience in the end, depending on how you play the game, is maybe founders, maybe investors, etc. At some point, that taste flips. I'm with you. I actually think that Donald Trump 10 years earlier, the time wasn't right for himself to get appreciated as the person that he is by the
Mhm.
voters. But then came whatever it was. Maybe there was oversaturation of bullshit on social media that
Mhm.
contributed to it. Maybe it was that the preceding president what wasn't being perceived as genuine, whatever. I'm not making political comments right now. I'm just literally reflecting about, if I were to meet Donald Trump, I would entirely expect him to be the way he is on stage in a one-on-one meeting. I could be wrong, but that's how my perception
Hmm.
of that is. And while I don't agree with, by the way, there's no politician on this planet with whom I agree on every policy, and
Mhm.
neither is it with the, again, new president of the United States. I don't agree with him on some of the policies as well. But I do appreciate that I can believe he's genuine.
Hmm.
That's the one thing I do appreciate here. And so for me, why are VCs not being more genuine? I don't understand it. I mean, there was this other discussion, hey, that we had with Owen and Martin. Hey, is it better to maybe play the option game? Or should I tell founders what I really think? And I'm like, why is that even a question? Of course, I tell founders what I really think. Like,
Hmm.
how can I piss someone off with the truth if I deliver it respectfully and thoughtfully? And if
Mhm.
I admit that I can be wrong, but isn't it way more like furthering everybody if we share what's going on in our minds? Like, I don't understand it. For that reason, I don't think actually playing the marketing game is even to someone's benefit.
I mean, look, it depends on how long uh, are you thinking, and by you, I don't mean you as any third person VC. If you Are you treating it as a one shot game, or are you treating it as a infinite shot game? And also, are you treating it as something you're sending out into the universe, which is valid for say 1 or 2 years, or something which you expect to be valid for the
Hmm.
next 5 or 10 years? I think literally the other day with the Bricks and Bytes guys, we were referencing another influencer VC investor who made a lot of predictions about a portfolio company of
Yeah.
his, which obviously went bust less than a year ago. I think, here's a thought experiment. And I think I had done this exercise a couple of years ago, but for any of our viewers and listeners, I encourage you to do this. Go back and check any of the influencer investors, or very popular investors on Instagram or on podcasts, etc., what sort of predictions they were making for
Oh
which
my God, that's
companies,
going to be an
which
atrocious backtest.
founders they were excited about in 2021, how that turned out. If they haven't deleted that content, many of them of course have also deleted and modified that content since. Also check what they were promoting last year and if that's valid anymore. And maybe if you don't believe what I'm saying is true, maybe see what they've been promoting through all of 2024, see what proportion of it remains valid 2 years from now. I think you may be surprised by what low percentage of those predictions or those endorsements are true or valid.
It's going to be atrocious. And I lose respect for people actually when they do that. Like these are not my favorite co-investors or people that invest after
Hmm.
me, for one simple reason, and it goes back to the top of our conversation, Shub. We are in the business of making close to perfect as possible decisions under
Hmm.
imperfect information, and so are the founders that we partner with
Hmm.
all the time. Except
Yeah.
they have to take 10 times more decisions.
Yeah.
And so when I invite someone that is not to be trusted into the decision making influencer circle of,
Hmm.
for example, a board setting, I'm actually reducing the chances of my startup to succeed. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And why would I want to do that? I always tell my younger colleagues when I coach them, and I have said that to founders as well, I don't trust people when I don't see two things.
Hmm.
Just flat out, I will not trust you. Number one, if I don't understand your motivations. And
Hmm.
number two, if you don't understand your own boundaries. Because I cannot trust people who don't know themselves.
Yeah.
People who are unable to express where they want to go and to
Hmm.
understand what they have to overcome, what they have to learn, what they have to stretch themselves at, they are not to be trusted because they do not know their own limitations or goals.
Hmm.
So, someone like that, I would not put into my decision making circle, is what I'm
Hmm.
saying.
Yeah.
And so that's when I lose respect for investors who put out these ridiculous claims or propaganda, etc. And it's
Hmm.
through backtesting you can prove it's wrong. Or maybe I've been in the room of the story that they told and it actually wasn't that way.
Yeah.
To me, when I know that, I don't want them in my decision making circle.
Hmm. So are you saying, Patrick, that just like all other VCs, we will also be proven wrong and we'll regret what we've been saying on Practical Nerds for 51 episodes preceding this one?
Have we made predictions?
Let me think. Hmm. I don't think so, but maybe someone who's has a keen eye for detail can let us know if we ever have made any predictions in any of our
I,
episodes.
I I can't remember one because I try to very cautiously stay away from the
Hmm.
prediction game. I mean, that's another thing. It feels like today I'm in Methusalem wisdom giving mode. But another thing that I keep telling people is I'm not in the business of making predictions. That's the easiest way as a VC to lose money is to make predictions. I'm only in the business of observing.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do.
Hmm.
And for that reason, I'm very conscious about not making
Yeah.
predictions. I don't want to say one slipped me, maybe once or twice, but if you compare me to a lot of other VCs, you will see that I make almost close to zero predictions for
Hmm.
exactly that reason. And I also almost close to zero promote my own companies
Hmm.
unless I do it on a fact basis.
Yeah.
Um, for me, that is very important because I never want to get caught, Shub, in a moment where, oops, FTX was a fraud and I kept promoting it. I
Yes.
mean, that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it?
It is. It is. I mean, there've been quite a few of these embarrassing situations in the last 2.5 years, and you know, again, I think there's like this legendary VC firm which we all like and admire, which has promoted not just FTX, Patrick, a lot of uh, companies which have been very, very suspicious in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Including cases where some of them have promoted the founder to the moon in very popular media publications. And yeah, then soon after that, you'll find they're in legal battles with the same person and stuff like that. So, uh, anyway, that's what's been going on.
So
So,
back to podcasts. I feel like that podcast is one way how this propaganda has been perpetuated.
Mhm.
So for me, I think for you and me, the podcast is just um, there's a different reason. I think we have never started it for marketing reasons. We haven't started it for audience reasons. In
Mhm.
fact, to this day, I actually don't know what the audience of the last 6 months was, believe it
Nice.
or not, because I don't look at it. genuinely, you and I, we just talk here in front of a camera instead of without a camera.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's this old wisdom that the best form of learning is to teach. I'm not saying we attempt to teach through this podcast, but I think a version of that, modified perhaps to VC, is if you can't articulate to yourself or to a colleague or a friend of yours in simple lay speak what you're doing or how you make decisions, and you have to reduce it to a sales pitch, then perhaps you should reconsider your profession. And therefore, I feel like if I can exercise that muscle of just having a simple conversation to figure out what I do, in some ways, I'm expanding my own learning ability to get better at my own
I
craft.
agree. And believe me, there's no better training at explaining complex things in simple ways than talking to you. So
Really? Okay.
yeah.
I will take that as a compliment and put that alongside your commentary on my topic on the Roman numeral. I'm still going to lobby for that one in a future episode.
We'll do it. We'll do it over the holidays. But hey, about the teaching comment, be careful because there's also the saying that those who can't teach. So
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
um, we have a German saying which I'm not sure if I said it during our last holiday special episode, but
Mhm.
um, so it translates to the one-eyed has taught the blind. Um,
I think we had it in the long list. I'm trying to recall if it made it into the short list in the episode.
yeah. So hopefully you and I are not that.
I feel like it did make it there. I feel like it did make it there, and we drew the learning from there that perhaps I mean, I was about to say perhaps the VC is the one-eyed, but now I'm thinking, do we deserve that accolade? Perhaps we are the blind.
I think as a profession, I hope to stand out in the profession, but I think as a profession, it's yeah. If we can level up to one-eyed as a profession, that would be
Yeah,
quite the level up.
nice.
So why are we keeping going with podcasting?
I mean, look, at the least, I think I at least find it fun. I find it intellectually engaging. Um, as I said, it kind of helps me train a different muscle in my learning loop, which I think helps in the overall building of the craft. And interestingly, what I have been told by a few people, a few founders, is that hey, it gets them to know me better.
Yeah,
Which obviously we are a global setup, distributed and investing around the world, and I think you know a model or a format which I guess helps someone get to know the other person if you're seeking an investment for the next several years. It's a useful format, especially and hopefully if you don't treat it as propaganda, which certainly our objective is not for it to be propaganda. And I at least don't think I have the patience or the time to start doing propaganda at this stage.
you know how you can spot propaganda is the amount of production budget that
Hmm.
goes into a podcast. I think it correlates near one to one.
I think then we would definitely qualify as negative propaganda, Patrick.
Yeah, so I mean, literally, the only thing we invested in is a microphone. That's it.
Yeah.
No intro, no outro, no big post production, etc. I mean, not to don't get me wrong, right? So there are instances where when you do a one off, um, some of this just contributes to the overall ease of consuming the
Hmm.
content when it's very long format, like a documentary that we did for Fundamental, for
Yeah.
example. But I think on an ongoing basis, the if you want to have genuineness, you want to have the real people, you want to get the profiles on the contours of the persons behind,
Hmm.
it's much more likely that these people will feel comfortable being their true selves if you lower the bar of everything around it.
Yeah.
Fun anecdote. One of my portfolio founders
Hmm.
last week announced a huge national partnership
Okay.
and like got a lot of media
Hmm.
for it, and that was the intention. To be fair, so he traveled to the office of the partner.
Hmm.
Big enterprise, huge brand, well known, highly professional, highly profitable partner.
Hmm.
He traveled to there in order to get interviewed with the CEO, so the two CEOs of both companies together, by
Okay.
the podcast team
Mm-hmm.
of that enterprise client. And so
Oh.
the founder tells me, hey, I asked him, hey, how was it? Like I thought the episode was good and you guys talked. He said, man, it took 2.5 hours of setup time to get the podcast started. Shub, can you imagine you and me sitting here for 2.5 hours preparing our podcast? Like, tell me how after 2.5 hours someone can still be genuine. Like you are so trained to
Yeah.
now be stiff and like you're setting a very, very high bar. And now I have to do makeup and now I have to whatever, yeah, I'm doing this to my hair. I don't care, right? But so
Yeah.
so he was saying, hey, I mean, so professional and so important that everything was being right and you need to be with the messages on point. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that's marketing. That
Hmm.
is marketing. I'm not saying marketing is bad. My company's better be good at marketing. That's
Yeah.
important, right? But when I listen to a podcast about venture to two VC guys, in my opinion, that's the opposite of what you should want. You should
Yeah.
want the low barrier, low threshold, genuine kind of stuff.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Fully in agreement with you.
Yeah. So, do we change anything?
Hmm. Good point. I feel like, instinctively and as a sly remark, I feel like the answer to that should be nothing at all, just as our intro said. Our extremely low budget intro that I recorded on the fly. Um, we do get, so we have been told before that the live format didn't quite jive well with our style of discussion, which is why we've run with a different style for most of the remaining episodes. I mean, so in our some of our earlier episodes, Patrick, we've had guests over. So I think we've now settled into a pattern where it's more you and me chatting.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, should we go back to having guests? Do we do more episodes with each other?
I think guess works if we expand the time. So I think if you do 3, 4, or 5 hours of podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
it works
Mm-hmm.
because then you actually have an hour of getting comfortable with. I mean, not that we weren't, but still, it's
Yeah.
you are introducing a new variable of the public eye, etc. So you're getting comfortable with each other in a new context, and so after that, what I've noticed from other podcasts that go longer with guests, it becomes very deep, and I appreciate that. So that's pretty cool. I think having guests for an hour, it wouldn't work for me. I think
Mm.
it's just not a setup where you can quickly within that hour get to a point where you're as comfortable talking about anything and nothing like
Yes.
you are, between the two of us. So I'm open to exploring it, but it would have to be very long format, and
Yeah.
and that is then always a time question.
I agree. I agree. I think it's a. I have a similar set of views. It's very hard to find that sort of rhythm immediately, and I also feel like we have to navigate the process of being more formal first. If we avoid that, we have to go through this awkward dance of first being informal, then being formal, etc., which I
Yeah.
think breaks the rhythm a little bit. But I think nevertheless, it's something worth considering if we should bring that format back.
So here's a bonus question for you.
Hmm.
When, and I'm sure you've heard this from different angles, when someone tells you, hey, this startup must be awesome because I listened to the founder on that podcast.
Hmm.
Like, have you heard that line of reasoning?
I have, yes.
So what is your thinking when you hear something like that?
So me personally, I completely disregard the podcast being a data point. I immediately move to asking about numbers, facts, why the company might be exciting. And then if that I mean, it's not always that the company by itself has to have facts supporting it, but then I still want to get to, and this is my style of investing. By the way, others are different. My style of investing, I want to uh, find a core kernel of truth as to why I should be excited about a deal. and that core kernel of truth should have nothing to do with anyone else's validation or excitement for it. So that's what I'm always seeking in any company that I want to get excited about. So, in other words, a podcast by itself would not really amount to much in my assessment.
Um,
Sorry, just to clarify, if that podcast, so the reason for that podcast episode adding to excitement was that it went into great detail about the numbers, that would amount to something.
hmm.
Although I must admit, I haven't come across such a episode, like, extremely rarely. If at all a podcast episode goes into detail about the numbers of a startup, it's always stuff from like at least a year ago, if not even longer. It's never real time, so it's not that helpful anymore.
Maybe pre-IPO, when the filing has been done. But
Yes,
then they don't talk about it because they are afraid of getting sued for saying the wrong thing. Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Uh, so I don't want to go so far to say there is a negative correlation for my interest once a founder is um, very great at storytelling, for example, on a podcast. So it's not a negative correlation, but I have become cautious over the years,
Hmm.
and that expands to podcasts, but it expands to pitch meetings as well,
Yeah.
or events. And the reason is the following. The venture ecosystem, as it becomes more liquid, and you can see it perfectly in the United States, um, because it's the most liquid and most mature market. And so
Hmm.
it's the first one to actually have what I'm about to say.
Hmm.
As it matures and as it becomes more liquid, you increase the quality and you increase the noise. And so actually, so take this thought experiment, Shub. So when you were Sequoia in the 1970s,
Hmm.
and you spotted Steve Jobs with Apple Computer,
Hmm.
whom, if I remember correctly, I believe they knew Jobs from his previous company, actually, where he was an
Okay.
employee. I have
Hmm.
to fact check myself, but my memory tells me that was the case.
Okay.
Two things were present at that time. One, you had almost, compared to today, almost no noise on founder pitches because
Hmm.
the ecosystem was barren
Yeah.
to the amount of companies that you would get to see, and then the amount of just transformative ideas
Yeah.
that you would see. And two, there was almost no capital competition.
Yeah.
Like if you compared it to today, it would be dreamland for a
Hmm.
VC, to win the generational deal, but also to see and spot what is truly generational and what not. And you know what the difference is? Less noise.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about statistics here. If you just want to play a portfolio game, you can just make as much money as you can today on a statistical basis as you could back then. You still had to be right. You still had to be in the generational outcomes, etc. I'm talking about the process of decision making, not the statistics part of it.
Okay.
And so that noise, unfortunately, becomes noisier and louder the more you train founders in how to tell stories and how to
Hmm.
communicate well.
Yeah.
And that's what you see out of some of these ecosystems,
Yes.
right? So they don't actually train how to be a better founder. All they do is how to be a better storyteller and narrator,
Yeah.
right? Because quite clearly that is a competence to have, not just for fundraising. That's the first thing that people think of, but actually for hiring. That's a very important skill for sales. I saw a quote online the other day, which I absolutely loved, where
Hmm.
someone said, sorry, I forgot their name. I should have, um, but still, it was someone that I respected. Said online, "Hey, the more you mature in your career, you will eventually always be in a sales function." Think about that; it's
Oh yeah.
true. And
I
so,
think I think that was Sam Altman,
or
Patrick.
was it Sam Altman? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I think he's right, right? And so that comes with communication ability. So I'm not saying, hey, don't teach people communication. No, no, please do. But it introduces noise because
Yeah.
now they can use their communication abilities as noise in a very liquid, noisy capital
Yeah.
market. And so that means that as a signal, I cannot use communication at all for my decision making. How well someone communicates, it's a commodity, or in markets where it's not a commodity, it's also not a downside. It just isn't a signal I can use.
Yeah.
When it's good communication. When it's bad communication, that could be a signal. But when it's good communication, it's not a signal at all. It doesn't tell me how nonlinear the founder is or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there are also very popular, iconic accelerators or early stage investors uh, whose name abbreviates to two alphabets and who run successful, quote unquote, successful programs twice a year. And I think it's maybe going to be more often than twice
Yeah.
a year now. I think now their cohorts are more or less productized, and every single startup which is part of the cohort, they all kind of present the same spiel, all are well spoken, all kind of clearly follow the same playbook of trying to quickly and efficiently navigate the investors through
Yes.
a very slick pitch, presenting a high valuation and so on. So, at least for me, I'm very wary of these kinds of situations, which to my, I was about to use the word symptoms, which is probably more a closer description of what's going on
Yeah.
rather than
It's a lot of
observation.
noise.
Yeah.
And one thing they always can do is they can communicate.
Yeah.
So it's not a signal I can use.
Yeah.
Now, Shub, you and I will keep communicating. We'll keep putting ourselves out there. We will try to be as unfiltered as possible, but being respectful of other people's information. So, of course, nobody should ask of us, hey, can you please just put this information out there that belongs to another startup? We're not going to
Yeah.
do that. But we'll keep putting ourselves out there to be attacked, flanked, whatever. That
Mhm.
comes with the territory of not trying not to do propaganda, but rather being genuine. I
Yeah.
enjoy that, so let's keep going.
Sounds like a plan, sir.
All right. Happy weekend, sir.
Happy weekend.
Ciao.